The thing about loving someone who used to be your enemy is that you spend a lot of time in courtrooms together, arguing about things that actually matter, and then you come home and argue about things that absolutely don't. Like whether a hot dog qualifies as a sandwich. Or whether the proper way to load a dishwasher is his way, which is chaotic and wrong, versus my way, which is correct and based on engineering principles. Or whether Julian's habit of leaving half-empty coffee cups on every flat surface in the apartment constitutes a deliberate psychological experiment designed to test my patience. It's not deliberate, Julian said one morning, when I found 3 separate mugs, one on the bathroom sink, one on the bookshelf, one balanced precariously on the edge of the television, all with varying levels of cold coffee still inside. It's a creative process. I'm exploring the relationship between caffeine and spatial awareness. You're exploring how to drive me insane. That too. It's a dual-purpose study. I handed him all 3 mugs. You're washing these. By hand. No dishwasher shortcuts. The dishwasher was designed for this exact purpose. The dishwasher was designed for plates and silverware, not for mugs that had been strategically deployed around the apartment like coffee-based landmines. He sighed, taking the mugs with the expression of a man who had been sentenced to hard labor. This is cruel and unusual punishment. This is domestic accountability. I'm a lawyer. I know cruel and unusual when I see it. You're a lawyer who once argued that a parking ticket violated his 8th Amendment rights. The 8th Amendment prohibits excessive fines. That parking ticket was excessive. It was $40, Julian. $40 I could have spent on pastrami. The principle stands. These were the moments I loved most, the small, stupid arguments that meant nothing and everything at the same time. They were the evidence of a life built together, a life that had no room for the weight of the past because the present was too full of coffee cups and parking tickets and the particular way Julian's hair stuck up in the morning, like he'd been electrocuted in his sleep. 8 years ago, I had stood at my father's grave and sworn I would never be happy again. Now I was happy. Genuinely, ridiculously, domestically happy. And the strangest part was, I'd stopped feeling guilty about it. Your face is doing something, Julian said, interrupting my thoughts. My face always does something. It's a face. No, it's doing a specific thing. The thing where you're thinking about something serious and trying to decide whether to say it out loud. I stared at him. How do you do that? Do what? Read my face like that. It's unnerving. I've been studying your face for 8 years. First as my enemy, then as my ally, then as my partner, now as the woman who yells at me about coffee cups. I've catalogued every expression. There's a spreadsheet. There is not a spreadsheet. There's a mental spreadsheet. It's color-coded. I threw a dish towel at him. He caught it, because of course he did. The man had the reflexes of a former athlete and the domestic competence of a golden retriever. The combination was baffling. The coffee cup situation needs to improve, I said. Define improve. Fewer coffee cups. In fewer locations. That's vague. I need specific metrics. I want to be able to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without encountering a mug that's been sitting there since Tuesday. Julian considered this. What if I switch to disposable cups? Then you're single-handedly destroying the environment. What if I switch to a single cup that I carry with me everywhere? That's called a travel mug. Millions of people use them. It's a solved problem. He looked genuinely amazed, as if I'd just revealed the secrets of the universe. A travel mug. Why didn't I think of that? Because you were too busy deploying coffee-based landmines around the apartment. Fair point. I'll order one today. With Amazon Prime. Expedited shipping. You're going to prime a travel mug. It's an emergency. What's the emergency? The woman I love is threatening to leave me over my caffeine distribution habits. I'm not threatening to leave you. I'm threatening to make you sleep on the couch. The couch is very comfortable. That's not a deterrent. Then I'll hide all the coffee in the apartment. He gasped, genuinely offended. That's a human rights violation. I'll file a motion. You'll file a motion in our apartment? I'll file a motion in the Court of Domestic Disputes. I'll represent myself. I'll call witnesses. Who would be your witness? Marcus. He's seen the coffee cup situation firsthand. He once told me it was impressively chaotic. Marcus is not a credible witness. Marcus once tried to bug his own toaster. The toaster was acting suspiciously. I laughed, and Julian grinned, and the argument dissolved the way all our arguments did, not with a winner, but with laughter. It was one of the things I'd learned about loving someone who had once been your enemy. You had to learn to fight differently. Not to wound. Not to destroy. But to disagree without leaving scars. Fine, I said. Keep your coffee cups. But if I find one in the bathroom again, I'm throwing it out the window. 12th floor. That could kill someone. Then don't leave coffee cups in the bathroom. This is a reasonable compromise. I accept the terms. He kissed me on the forehead and went to wash the mugs, humming something that sounded vaguely like an opera aria but was probably just made up. Julian couldn't carry a tune to save his life, but he hummed constantly, a habit his mother said he'd had since childhood. He hummed in the womb, Eleanor had told me once. I could feel the vibrations. His father said it was gas. I said it was music. We were both right. The Raymond Ellis case consumed the next 3 months of our lives, but in the best way. After Judge Harrison granted our motion to vacate, the prosecution declined to retry the case. They knew a losing battle when they saw one, and Raymond walked out of prison on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, wearing a suit we'd bought him and a smile that hadn't faded since the moment the judge made her ruling. His family was waiting at the gate. His wife, Gloria, who had written him a letter every single week for 18 years. His daughter, Maya, now 32, with 2 children of her own, children Raymond had never met until that moment. His son, Elijah, who had been 10 years old when his father was arrested and was now a grown man with gray in his hair and his father's eyes. I stood at the back of the crowd with Julian, watching the reunion unfold. It was the kind of moment that made every sleepless night worth it. Every frustrating hearing. Every judge who said no. Every piece of evidence that led nowhere. All of it was worth it for the moment a family became whole again. I'm not crying, Julian said. You're definitely crying. I'm not crying. My eyes are sweating. Your eyes have been sweating for 3 consecutive minutes. It's allergies. Spring pollen. Very aggressive this year. There's no pollen in a prison parking lot. There's always pollen. Pollen is everywhere. It's a scientifically documented fact. I handed him a tissue. He took it without comment, dabbing at his eyes while pretending he wasn't. The man had argued in front of the Supreme Court. He had cross-examined murderers and fraudsters and corrupt politicians. And here he was, weeping in a parking lot because a man he'd never met before this case was finally free. You're a good man, Julian Pierce, I said. I'm an adequate man with good research skills and a partner who does all the emotional heavy lifting. You're a good man. Accept the compliment. Fine. I'm a good man. But I'm also emotionally compromised by spring pollen. Raymond Ellis came up to us after he'd embraced his entire extended family, his face wet with tears, his hands shaking. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, but prison had aged him in ways that couldn't be measured in years. His eyes had the look of someone who had seen too much and learned to expect too little. Mr. Pierce. Ms. One. His voice was hoarse, rusty from years of disuse in a system that didn't encourage conversation. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Julian said. Just go home. Be with your family. That's all the thanks we need. I spent 18 years thinking no one believed me. 18 years thinking I was going to die in there. He shook his head, his eyes filling with fresh tears. And then you 2 showed up. 2 lawyers I'd never met, fighting for me like I was their own family. I felt my own eyes sting. You deserved better than what the system gave you. We just tried to fix a little piece of it. A little piece? Raymond laughed, a wet, disbelieving sound. You gave me my life back. That's not a little piece. His wife, Gloria, came up beside him, slipping her arm through his. She was a small woman, gray-haired and gentle, with the kind of steady presence that comes from decades of holding things together when everything was falling apart. Thank you, she said simply. For believing him. For fighting for him. For giving me my husband back. Julian opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. For once in his life, Julian Pierce was speechless. I stepped in to fill the silence. It was an honor, I said. Truly. Cases like this, they're why we do what we do. Gloria smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Your father would be proud of you, Ms. One. I read about his case in the papers. I know what you went through. And I know what it took for you to become the person you are now. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. That means more than I can say. Raymond and Gloria walked away, hand in hand, toward a car that would take them home for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Their children and grandchildren crowded around them, a moving fortress of love and relief. Julian and I stood in the parking lot, watching them go. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. It was the kind of sky my father would have called a gift. Your father would be proud of you, Julian said quietly. You know that, right? I know. I mean it. Not just because of the cases. Because of everything. Because of who you are. I turned to look at him. Who am I? You're the woman who spent 7 years fighting for justice for her father, and then turned around and spent every year since fighting for justice for strangers. You're the woman who forgave the man who put her father in prison. You're the woman who builds things instead of destroying them. You're the best person I know. That's a very long list. I have more. I can keep going. Please don't. I'm already crying. Julian smiled and handed me back the tissue he'd used earlier. It's clean. Mostly. Gross. It's practical. We're sharing resources. It's environmentally conscious. I laughed through my tears. You're ridiculous. I'm in love. Same thing. That night, we celebrated at our usual Italian restaurant in the village. The waiter, whose name we'd finally learned was Giuseppe, brought us champagne without being asked. On the house, he said, in heavily accented English. For the lawyers who free innocent men. How did you know about that? Julian asked. I read the papers. Also, your mother called ahead and told me to give you the good champagne. Of course she did. Giuseppe poured 2 glasses and then, as was tradition, sang something in Italian that sounded both celebratory and vaguely threatening. Julian sang back. Giuseppe looked delighted. I looked resigned. You're getting better at the singing, I admitted. I've been practicing. Giuseppe gives me lessons. Giuseppe gives you Italian opera lessons? In exchange for legal advice. He's trying to get his nephew a work visa. We've been bartering. That's the most Julian Pierce arrangement I've ever heard. I prefer to think of it as community-based legal services with musical compensation. We drank our champagne and ate our pasta and argued about whether the tiramisu was better here or at the place around the corner. Julian insisted the other place had superior mascarpone. I insisted he was wrong. We ordered tiramisu from both places and did a blind taste test. I was right. Julian conceded gracefully, which for him meant complaining about it for the rest of the meal. You only won because your palate is more refined, he grumbled. My palate is objectively correct. There's no such thing as objectively correct tiramisu. There is. It's the one from this restaurant. Giuseppe, walking past with a tray of desserts, nodded approvingly. She's right. Our tiramisu is better. I've been telling him for months. You're biased, Julian accused. I'm Italian. Tiramisu is my cultural heritage. I have authority. Julian threw up his hands in defeat. Fine. The tiramisu here is better. Are you happy? Ecstatic, I said. Vindicated, Giuseppe added. I'm being bullied by my girlfriend and my opera-singing waiter. Giuseppe patted him on the shoulder. You have good people around you, Mr. Julian. That's not bullying. That's love. After dinner, we walked home through the village. The streets were crowded with students and artists and couples who looked like they'd been walking these same paths for decades. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the promise of spring. Julian held my hand, his fingers laced through mine, his thumb tracing absent patterns on my skin. Can I tell you something? He asked. You can tell me anything. I was terrified this morning. Before the hearing. You didn't seem terrified. I've been faking calm for 8 years. I'm very good at it. What were you terrified of? Failing. Letting Raymond down. Letting you down. He paused. Letting your father down. I stopped walking. Julian. I know it doesn't make logical sense. Your father is gone. He's been gone for a long time. But I still feel like I'm trying to earn his forgiveness. Every case we win, every client we free, it's like I'm trying to prove to him that I'm not the man who put him in prison. That I'm someone better now. Julian, my father forgave you a long time ago. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I know my father. He believed in redemption. He believed that people could change. He would have seen the man you are now and been proud of you. Julian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Do you really think so? I don't think so. I know so. He nodded slowly, his eyes bright in the streetlight. Okay. 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 I believe you. You're the smartest person I know. If you say your father would have forgiven me, then I believe you. Good. Now stop arguing with me about tiramisu and walk me home. Yes, boss. Don't call me boss. Partner. Love of my life. Keeper of my coffee cups. Better. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of something burning. I threw on a robe and ran into the kitchen, where Julian was standing in front of the stove, holding a spatula and looking profoundly betrayed by the universe. I wanted to make you breakfast, he said. The stove is on fire. It's a small fire. Contained. Mostly. Julian, there are flames coming out of the pan. I was trying to make French toast. I followed a recipe. The recipe lied. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink. We'd bought one after the pancake incident of last year, a purchase I had initially questioned and now deeply appreciated, and put out the fire in approximately 3 seconds. Julian watched the entire process with the expression of a man who had just witnessed a magic trick. You're very competent in a crisis, he said. You set the kitchen on fire making French toast. The recipe said medium-high heat. I interpreted that as high heat with ambition. You can't interpret recipes. Recipes are instructions. You follow them. That's very rigid thinking. I expected more creativity from you. I stared at him, standing in my bathrobe in our smoke-filled kitchen, holding a fire extinguisher, and I started laughing. It was the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep in my chest, the kind of laugh I hadn't been able to access for years after my father died. Now it came easily. Freely. Like my body had finally remembered how. What's so funny? Julian asked, looking genuinely confused. You. Me. This. The fact that you've argued in front of the Supreme Court but can't make French toast without committing arson. Arson implies intent. This was accidental. Accidental arson is still arson. I'm going to need to research that. I don't think that's legally accurate. I set down the fire extinguisher and walked over to him, wrapping my arms around his waist. He smelled like smoke and batter and the particular brand of fancy soap he insisted on buying, even though it cost approximately 5 times as much as regular soap. "I love you," I said. "I love you too. Even though you're criticizing my cooking." "I'm not criticizing your cooking. I'm criticizing your approach to fire safety. That's a subset of cooking criticism." "Fine. I'm criticizing your cooking. And I love you anyway." He kissed the top of my head. "I love you anyway too." We ordered bagels. Julian sat at the kitchen table, still covered in flour, while I made coffee and tried to air out the apartment. The fire damage was minimal, just a scorched pan and a lingering smell that would probably take a week to dissipate. It was the third cooking-related incident in the past 6 months. At this rate, our kitchen would be fully renovated by accident by the end of the year. "I'm going to take a cooking class," Julian announced. "You've said that before." "I mean it this time. A real class. With a professional chef. I'm going to learn how to make at least 3 dishes that don't involve setting things on fire." 3 dishes. That's ambitious. I'm an ambitious person. I just hide it under layers of self-deprecation and weaponized incompetence. Weaponized incompetence is when you pretend to be bad at something to get out of doing it. You're not pretending. You're genuinely bad at cooking. Thank you. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. It wasn't a compliment. I'm choosing to receive it as one. I handed him a cup of coffee in the new travel mug he'd ordered after our coffee cup intervention. It had "World's Okayest Lawyer" printed on the side. He'd bought it ironically. He used it unironically. "So," I said, sitting down across from him. "What's on the agenda for today?" "Depositions in the Thompson case. Meeting with our expert witness. Lunch with Marcus, who says he has disturbing new information about the Strand network. And then, if we have time, existential dread." Existential dread is on your calendar? Every Thursday at 3. You know this. I thought you were joking about that. I never joke about existential dread. I took a sip of my coffee. "What time is the deposition?" 11. "But I need to prepare. I have index cards." "Color-coded?" "Always." The Thompson case was our newest wrongful conviction case, and it was a monster. Our client, Marcus Thompson, had been convicted of armed robbery 15 years ago based on the testimony of a single eyewitness, a witness who had since recanted, claiming the police had pressured her into identifying Thompson. The problem was that the recantation had happened 10 years ago, and Thompson was still in prison. His public defender had failed to file the proper motions. The appellate courts had denied his appeals. The system had failed him at every level. "He's been in prison for 15 years, I told Julian during our case review. He was 19 when he was arrested. He's 34 now. He spent almost half his life behind bars for a crime he didn't commit." "What's our angle?" "Actual innocence claim. The recantation is strong, but we need more. We need to prove not just that the witness was unreliable, but that someone else committed the crime." "Do we have a suspect?" "Maybe. The original police report mentions a second suspect who was never fully investigated. A man named Derek Shaw. He had a record for similar robberies, he matched the witness's initial description better than Thompson did, and he disappeared right after Thompson's arrest." Julian leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting into what I privately called his prosecutor mode, the intense, analytical focus that had made him one of the most effective litigators in the Southern District. It was the same look he'd had 8 years ago, when he was building the case against my father. The difference was, now he was using it to free people instead of imprison them. "Let's find Derek Shaw," he said. "If he's still alive, we track him down. If he's not, we find whatever records exist. Police interviews. Witness statements. Anything that points to him as the real perpetrator. That could take months. Then we'd better get started." We worked late into the night, combing through old police records, tracking down leads, building the case piece by piece. It was exhausting work, the kind of work that left you hollowed out and aching, questioning whether any of it made a difference. But then I would look at the list in Julian's desk drawer, the list of names, some crossed out, some still waiting, and I would remember why we did this. Every name on that list was a person. Every person had a family. Every family had been broken by a system that was supposed to protect them. And every time we crossed a name off the list, a family became whole again. "This is going to work," Julian said, sometime around midnight. "We're going to find this guy, and we're going to free Marcus Thompson." "How do you know?" "Because I refuse to accept any other outcome. Stubbornness is my superpower." "I thought ridiculousness was your superpower." "That's my secondary superpower. I have multiple. I'm very talented." I laughed, tired and giddy and full of a hope that felt almost reckless. "Let's go home. We can pick this up tomorrow. One more hour. I'm close to something." "Julian, it's midnight." Midnight is when breakthroughs happen. It's scientifically documented. You don't have a citation for that. I'm working on one. I sighed and sat back down. 1 hour. Then I'm dragging you home by your collar. Acceptable terms. The breakthrough came at 12:47 a.m. Julian found a police report from 17 years ago, 2 years before the Thompson robbery, in which Derek Shaw had been arrested for a nearly identical crime at a nearly identical location. The MO was the same. The description of the perpetrator was the same. The only difference was that Shaw had been released due to a procedural error, and the case had never gone to trial. "It's him," Julian said, his voice electric with exhaustion and excitement. "It's definitely him. Same location, same method, same everything. This is the guy who should have been convicted. Not Marcus Thompson. Can we use this? We can use this. It's pattern evidence. It establishes Shaw as the likely perpetrator. Combined with the witness recantation, it's enough to raise reasonable doubt about Thompson's guilt." I stared at the report, my heart pounding. "We're going to free another one. We're going to free another one." We filed the motion the next morning. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks to build a case that could free a man who had spent 15 years in prison for something he didn't do. It was going to be the hardest thing we had ever done. And we were ready. The Thompson hearing was set for a Tuesday in late May. The weeks leading up to it were a blur of witness interviews, legal research, and late-night strategy sessions that left us both exhausted and exhilarated. Julian had prepared 47 index cards, green for evidence, blue for legal arguments, red for emotional appeals, and had organized them into a complex system that only he understood. "This card just says, 'Remember Raymond,'" I said, picking up one of the red ones. "It's an emotional anchor. When I talk about Marcus Thompson, I want the judge to remember that we've done this before. That we've proven innocent men can be freed. That the system can work when people fight for it." "You're going to make the judge cry." "That's not the goal. But if it happens, I won't stop it." The morning of the hearing, I woke up to find Julian already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing his index cards one final time. He looked calm, outwardly, at least, but I knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled the cards. "Are you nervous?" I asked. "Terrified." "You don't look terrified." "Years of practice. Also, denial. Denial is very effective." I sat down across from him. "You're going to be brilliant. You always are." "That's very kind. Also probably inaccurate. But I appreciate the sentiment." "It's not inaccurate. You've won every major hearing we've had. You're the best litigator I've ever seen. You're biased. I'm objective. I spent 7 years hating you. I had plenty of time to assess your skills." Julian laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "That's the strangest compliment I've ever received." "It's not a compliment. It's a statement of fact. From you, that's a compliment." The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock. We arrived at the courthouse at 8:30, which gave us 90 minutes to pace the hallway and second-guess every decision we had ever made. Priya arrived with coffee and moral support, as always. "You're going to win," she said confidently. "Your evidence is solid. Your argument is airtight. And Julian's index cards are terrifyingly comprehensive." "Thank you," Julian said. "I put a lot of work into those cards. I can tell. You color-coded them by emotional resonance. That's either brilliant or deeply concerning. Why not both?" The bailiff called us into the courtroom at exactly 10. Judge Morrison, a man in his 50s with a reputation for being tough but fair, sat on the bench, his expression unreadable. "Good morning, Your Honor," Julian said, standing at the podium. "We are here today on a motion to vacate the conviction of Marcus Thompson, who has spent 15 years in prison for a crime he did not commit." The hearing lasted 4 hours. Julian presented the pattern evidence linking Derek Shaw to the crime. He presented the witness recantation. He presented the police misconduct that had tainted the original investigation. And at the end, he picked up the red index card. "Your Honor," he said, "I want to talk about Raymond Ellis. Last year, this firm represented Mr. Ellis, who had spent 18 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. We presented evidence of his innocence. This court, your court, granted his motion to vacate. Mr. Ellis is now free." He paused, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Marcus Thompson has been in prison for 15 years. He was 19 years old when he was arrested. He is now 34. He has spent almost half his life behind bars for a crime committed by someone else. Your Honor, we have the evidence. We have the witness. We have the pattern. All we need is for this court to do what it did for Raymond Ellis, give an innocent man his life back." Judge Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Mr. Pierce, I've reviewed the evidence. I've heard the arguments. And I am inclined to agree with you." Julian's hands tightened on the podium. "Your Honor, I'm granting the motion to vacate. Mr. Thompson is entitled to a new trial. And based on the evidence presented, would strongly encourage the prosecution to consider whether a new trial is in the interest of justice." The courtroom erupted. Marcus Thompson, sitting at the defense table, buried his face in his hands and wept. His mother, seated in the gallery, let out a cry that was equal parts joy and grief and relief. Julian turned to me, his face dazed. "We won. We won. Again. Again." He smiled. It was the big smile, the one that made him look 10 years younger and slightly deranged. "This never gets old." "No," I said, smiling back. "It never does." Marcus Thompson was released on bail 3 days later. The prosecution declined to retry the case. After 15 years, he was finally free. We stood at the prison gates with his family, his mother, his sister, his niece who had been born while he was inside. When he walked through the gate, his mother collapsed against him, sobbing. His sister wrapped her arms around both of them. His niece, who was 7 years old and had only ever known her uncle through prison visits and photographs, tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Are you really coming home now?" "Yes, baby," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I'm really coming home." Julian and I stood at the back of the crowd, watching. I was crying. Julian was crying, though he would deny it later. "Spring pollen," he said. "Sure. Very aggressive this year." "Absolutely." He handed me a tissue. I handed it back. We stood there, 2 lawyers who had spent years fighting for justice, weeping in a prison parking lot because an innocent man was finally free. "This is why we do this," I said. "Yeah," Julian said. "This is exactly why." That night, we had dinner at our Italian restaurant. Giuseppe brought us champagne without being asked. He sang something in Italian. Julian sang back. I didn't even pretend to be annoyed. "You're getting soft," Julian observed. "I'm getting happy." There's a difference. Is there? I used to think happiness was a weakness. Something that could be taken away at any moment. Now I think it's the whole point. Julian reached across the table and took my hand. That's very philosophical. I've had a lot of time to think. What else have you been thinking about? I looked at him, this ridiculous, brilliant, infuriating, wonderful man who had been my enemy and my ally and my partner and my home. And I realized, with a clarity that felt like dawn breaking, that I was ready. I've been thinking about the future, I said. What about the future? Our future. Together. Permanently. Julian's face went very still. Evie, are you? I'm not proposing. Not yet. But I want you to know that when you're ready, when we're ready, I'm going to say yes. You already know I'm going to ask. Julian, you've been carrying around a ring in your briefcase for 3 months. You're not subtle. He looked genuinely shocked. How did you know about the ring? Marcus told me. Marcus? How did Marcus know? You told Marcus. When you were drunk at his retirement party. You gave a 20-minute speech about how much you loved me and then showed him the ring and asked if he thought I would say yes. Julian closed his eyes. I don't remember any of that. Marcus recorded it. He sent me the video. Of course he did. That man is a menace. He's a romantic. He said it was the most beautiful declaration of love he'd ever heard. Then he said you were disgustingly sincere, and that his ex-wife would have hated it. Julian opened his eyes. So you've known for 3 months? I've known for 3 months. I've been waiting for you to ask. Why didn't you say something? Because I wanted you to do it in your own time. With your PowerPoint. And your index cards. And your color-coded emotional appeals. Julian stared at me for a long moment. Then he started laughing. It was the biggest laugh I'd ever heard from him, full and warm and slightly unhinged. Giuseppe, walking past with a tray of desserts, looked mildly alarmed. Everything okay? Giuseppe asked. Everything's perfect, Julian said. I'm going to propose to this woman, and she already knows, and she's going to say yes, and I have a PowerPoint prepared. A PowerPoint, Giuseppe repeated. 47 slides. With citations. Your mother's PowerPoint had 47 slides, I said. She set the standard. I intend to exceed it. Giuseppe shook his head and walked away, muttering something in Italian that sounded like, "These lawyers are insane." Julian took my hand across the table. So. You already know my speech. You've already seen the ring. Is there any point in me actually proposing? Yes, I said. Because I want to hear you say it. All of it. The speech. The PowerPoint. The color-coded emotional appeals. The PowerPoint is very long. I have time. You might cry. I'm counting on it. He smiled. That big, ridiculous, 10 years younger smile. Okay. But not here. Not in the restaurant. Somewhere better. Somewhere with fewer singing waiters. Giuseppe would be devastated to miss it. Giuseppe can come to the wedding. He'll insist on singing. Then he'll sing. I don't care. As long as you say yes. I'm going to say yes, I said. I've been ready to say yes for 3 months. 3 months is a long time to wait. You're worth waiting for. He squeezed my hand. So are you. We finished our champagne and our tiramisu, from this restaurant, obviously, because it was objectively better, and we walked home through the village, hand in hand, the city humming around us. The same city where my father had died. The same city where Julian had destroyed his career. The same city where we had built something new from the ashes of everything that came before. And soon, this city would be where Julian Pierce got down on one knee, with 47 PowerPoint slides and a ring he'd been carrying in his briefcase for 3 months, and asked me to marry him. And I would say yes. AI. 2. The proposal, when it finally came, was not at the Italian restaurant with Giuseppe singing backup. It was not at the office with color-coded index cards scattered across the conference table. It was not even in Central Park, which would have been the obvious choice, the cliché choice, the choice that Julian had apparently considered and rejected because everyone proposes in Central Park. Evie, it's a cliché, and I refuse to be a cliché even though I own a travel mug that says, "World's okayest lawyer," which is itself deeply cliché. No, it isn't, I had told him. That's ironic cliché. That's different. Ironic cliché is still cliché. It's just cliché with self-awareness. Self-awareness makes everything better. Does it? Does self-awareness make my inability to cook French toast better? No. That's just sad. Exactly. Self-awareness doesn't fix everything. So Julian, being Julian, had rejected Central Park, rejected the restaurant, rejected every conventional proposal location that had ever been featured in a romantic comedy. Instead, he proposed to me in the one place that actually made sense, the office of Julian Pierce, attorneys at law, at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, surrounded by case files and empty coffee cups and the particular kind of exhausted euphoria that comes from winning a case everyone said was unwinnable. We had just gotten the call about Marcus Thompson. The prosecution, after 3 weeks of reviewing our evidence, had officially declined to retry the case. The charges were dropped. Marcus Thompson was not just out on bail, he was free. Permanently. Irrevocably. The system, for once in its miserable life, had worked. I hung up the phone and turned to Julian, who was sitting at his desk with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up and his hair sticking up in 17 different directions because he'd been running his hands through it for the past 6 hours. We won, I said. We won. We won. The prosecution dropped the charges. Marcus is free. Julian stared at me for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked around his desk, and kissed me. It was not a gentle kiss. It was the kind of kiss that happens when you've been holding your breath for weeks and can finally exhale. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I have something to tell you," he said. "You have something to tell me? We just freed an innocent man. What could possibly be bigger than that? This." He reached into his briefcase, the same briefcase he'd been carrying for 3 months, the same briefcase I'd been very carefully not looking at because I knew what was inside, and pulled out a small velvet box. I'd been carrying this around for 93 days. Marcus told me I should just do it already. He said life was too short to wait for the perfect moment. He said he'd spent 15 years in prison waiting for things to be perfect, and they never were, and the only thing that mattered was the people he loved. Marcus gave you proposal advice? Marcus gave me a lot of advice. He also told me to stop using self-deprecating humor as a defense mechanism, but I told him that was never going to happen. I looked at the box in his hands. Julian. Let me finish. I have a speech. It's not 47 slides because PowerPoint felt wrong for this moment, but I do have index cards if you want to see them. Please don't show me index cards right now. Fine. But they exist. They're in my desk. Color-coded. He took a breath. Evie. 8 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I put an innocent man in prison. I destroyed your family. I destroyed us. And I spent every day after that believing I didn't deserve to be happy. Julian. I'm not finished. Let me get through this or I'll lose my nerve. He took another breath. I spent 7 years believing I didn't deserve happiness. And then you walked back into my life, and you gave me a chance I didn't deserve. You let me help you. You let me fight beside you. You let me love you. And somewhere along the way, I started to believe that maybe, I deserved to be happy after all. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. It was simple and elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band, exactly the kind of ring I would have chosen for myself. I'm not asking you to forget what I did, he said. I'm not asking you to pretend the past didn't happen. I'm asking you to build a future with me anyway. A future with more late nights and more index cards and more victories we never thought we'd win. A future with coffee cups in weird places and burnt French toast and terrible opera singing. A future with me. Forever. If you'll have me. I stared at him. This ridiculous, brilliant, infuriating, wonderful man. This man who had been my enemy and my ally and my partner and my home. This man who had destroyed my life and then spent 8 years helping me rebuild it. Yes, I said. Yes. Yes. I'll marry you. I'll build a future with you. I'll deal with your coffee cups and your index cards and your complete inability to operate a toaster. Yes. He blinked. That's it? No counter-arguments? No cross-examination? Julian, I've known you were going to propose for 3 months. I've had my answer prepared since the day Marcus sent me that video of your drunken speech. You watched the whole video? Multiple times. You were very emotional. You cried. I did not cry. You cried for 6 minutes. Marcus zoomed in. Julian closed his eyes. I'm going to kill him. No, you're not. You're going to put the ring on my finger and kiss me, and then we're going to call your mother. He opened his eyes. My mother already knows. She helped me pick out the ring. Of course she did. She said, and I'm quoting here, if Evie says no, I'm disowning you and adopting her instead. Your mother has excellent judgment. She does. It's very annoying. He took the ring out of the box, his hands trembling slightly, and slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Eleanor had probably measured my ring finger while I was sleeping. It fits, I said. Eleanor stole one of your rings and had it sized. She's been planning this for months. Your mother stole my ring? She considers it strategic borrowing. She's very proud of herself. I looked at the ring on my finger, then at Julian, then back at the ring. We're engaged. We're engaged. We're getting married. We're getting married. Assuming you don't come to your senses and call it off. Julian. Yes? Shut up and kiss me again. He did. We called Eleanor first. She screamed so loudly that Julian had to hold the phone away from his ear. Then she demanded to speak to me directly. Evie, she said, her voice thick with tears. I've been waiting 8 years for this phone call. 8 years. I never gave up hope. Even when Julian was at his lowest, even when he was convinced he'd lost you forever, I knew. I knew you two would find your way back to each other. How did you know? Because I've never seen my son love anyone the way he loves you. Not before. Not since. You're it for him, Evie. You always have been. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Thank you, Eleanor. Call me Mom. You've earned it. Mom, I said, trying the word out. It felt strange and wonderful and right. Eleanor sniffled loudly. Now. When's the wedding? I need at least 6 months to plan. Possibly a year. There are flowers to consider. And a venue. And a menu. Mom, Julian said, taking the phone back. We just got engaged 5 minutes ago. Give us at least 24 hours before you start planning. 24 hours is unreasonable. I'll give you 12. That's not a compromise. It's a generous offer. Take it or leave it. Julian sighed. 12 hours. Then you can plan whatever you want. Excellent. I'll start the PowerPoint. She hung up. Julian stared at the phone. She's making a wedding PowerPoint, he said. She's your mother. Of course she's making a PowerPoint. This is going to be the most organized wedding in human history. I wouldn't expect anything less. We called Marcus next. He was less emotional than Eleanor, Marcus was never emotional, or at least never admitted to being emotional, but his voice went slightly gruff in a way that suggested he was more moved than he wanted to let on. "About time," he said. "I've been watching you two dance around each other for a year. It was exhausting. Thank you for your support, Marcus." "You're welcome. My ex-wife says I'm terrible at expressing genuine happiness for other people, but I'm genuinely happy for you. Both of you. That's very kind." "It's not kind. It's factual. You two are the best people I know. You deserve each other." He paused. "Also, I've already bought a wedding gift. It's a toaster. A very good toaster. Fireproof." Julian looked at me. Did he say fireproof? He knows about the French toast incident. Everyone knows about the French toast incident. It's become office legend. Marcus cleared his throat. "I have to go. I'm in the middle of a surveillance operation. But congratulations." "And Julian?" "Yes? Don't mess this up." "I'm trying not to." "Try harder." He hung up. Julian turned to me. "Everyone keeps telling me not to mess this up. Because everyone knows you're capable of messing things up." "That's fair. I did set the kitchen on fire. Twice. The second time was not my fault. The recipe was ambiguous. The recipe said, bake at 350 degrees. You set the oven to 550 because you thought it would cook faster. Time management is important. You can't manage time by doubling the temperature. You can't. I learned that the hard way." I laughed and kissed him. "I love you. Even though you're a danger to yourself and everyone in your kitchen. I love you too. Even though you're going to bring up the French toast incident at every family gathering for the rest of our lives." "Absolutely I am. It's going to be in my wedding speech." "You're going to give a wedding speech about my cooking failures?" "Among other things. It's going to be a very comprehensive speech. Possibly with PowerPoint. 47 slides. At least." Julian smiled. "I can't wait." The next morning, we told Priya. She cried, which was unexpected. Priya was usually the most composed person in any room. She blamed the tears on allergies, which was a lie, and then hugged both of us so tightly that Julian complained about his ribs. "I'm so happy for you," she said, pulling back with red-rimmed eyes. "I've been watching you two be quietly in love for a year. It was very frustrating. I wanted to lock you in a room together and refuse to let you out until you admitted your feelings." "That would have been false imprisonment," Julian said. "I'm a lawyer. I know the statute. It would have been worth the lawsuit." Priya, it turned out, had already planned a small office celebration. She'd ordered cupcakes from a bakery around the corner. I didn't make them myself because I wanted them to be edible, and decorated the conference room with a banner that said, "Finally," in large gold letters. "That's not a romantic banner," Julian observed. "It's an accurate banner," Priya said. "Everyone in this office has been waiting for this. Even the plants. The plants don't have opinions. The plants are thriving. That's their way of expressing approval." Julian looked at the conference room ficus, which had indeed been looking healthier lately. "I think that's because Evie's been watering it." "Evie's been watering everything in your life, Julian. That's why you're thriving too." I felt my face heat. "Priya. I'm not wrong. Before Evie came back, you were a mess. You wore the same suit for a week. You forgot to eat. You once tried to pay for coffee with your library card. I was going through a phase. You were going through 7 years of guilt and self-neglect. Evie fixed you. She didn't fix me. She helped me fix myself. That's even more romantic. I'm adding it to my speech for the wedding." "You're giving a speech?" "Everyone's giving a speech. Marcus has already written his. It's 3 pages. Single-spaced. With footnotes." Julian looked at me, his expression caught between horror and amusement. Marcus wrote footnotes for his wedding speech. Marcus writes footnotes for everything. He's an FBI agent. Documentation is his love language. That afternoon, we met with a new client, a woman named Angela Vasquez whose brother had been convicted of a gang-related shooting 15 years ago. The evidence was thin, the witnesses unreliable, the defense attorney overworked and underprepared. It was the same story we'd seen a dozen times before. "My brother is innocent," Angela said, her voice steady but her eyes desperate. "He's been in prison since he was 19. He's 34 now. Our mother died 3 years ago, and he couldn't even come to the funeral. We'll look into it," I promised. "We can't guarantee anything, but we'll do everything we can. That's all I'm asking. Someone to try." No one else would even take my calls. Julian walked her out, then came back to the conference room with a familiar expression, the one he got when a case was already consuming him. "This one's bad," he said. "The original investigation was a mess. The lead detective has since been fired for misconduct. 2 of the witnesses have recanted. And the prosecution withheld exculpatory evidence." "How do you know all that already?" Angela gave me the case file. "I skimmed it while you were talking to her." "You skimmed a 200-page case file in 5 minutes? I'm a fast reader. Also, I've seen this pattern before. Corrupt detective, unreliable witnesses, Brady violation. It's textbook. So we're taking the case?" "We're taking the case. Obviously." I smiled. "Obviously." We worked late that night, as we always did when a new case arrived. Julian spread his index cards across the conference table. He had a system now, a specific way of organizing evidence that I'd learned to follow even if I couldn't quite replicate it. Green for evidence. Blue for legal arguments. Red for the human element. Pink for questions we still needed to answer. "Pink is new," I said, picking up one of the cards. "Pink is for uncertainty. The things we don't know yet. The gaps we need to fill. There are a lot of pink cards. There are always a lot of pink cards at the beginning. They'll turn green eventually. How? Hard work. Persistence. The willingness to dig deeper than anyone else is willing to dig." He looked up at me. "And you? You're the best investigator I've ever worked with." "I'm a lawyer, not an investigator." "You're both. You find things other people miss. You always have. It's why you were able to uncover what happened to your father when no one else could." I was quiet for a moment. "I couldn't have done that without you." "You could have. You're the most stubborn person I know. You would have found a way. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone." He reached across the table and took my hand. "You'll never have to do anything alone again. That's the whole point of this." He touched the engagement ring on my finger. "Partners. In every sense of the word." "Partners," I agreed. We worked until midnight, filling pink cards with questions and green cards with answers. By the time we finally went home, the case was starting to take shape. It was still a long shot, most of our cases were, but long shots were what we did. Long shots were our specialty. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions, witness interviews, and late-night strategy sessions. The Vasquez case was harder than expected. 2 of the recanting witnesses had disappeared. The third had died 3 years ago, and his recantation had never been properly recorded. The corrupt detective was now living in Florida and refusing to cooperate. "We need a miracle," Julian said one night, staring at the evidence wall we'd constructed in the conference room. It was covered in photos and timelines and color-coded index cards, a visual map of the case that had taken over the entire room. "We don't need a miracle. We need a break." "What's the difference?" "Miracles are divine intervention. Breaks are just the result of hard work paying off." That's very philosophical for midnight on a Tuesday. I've been thinking about philosophy a lot lately. About justice. About what it means to do this work. And what have you concluded? I looked at the evidence wall, the faces of the witnesses, the timeline of the crime, the photo of Carlos Vasquez at 19, young and scared and unaware that his life was about to be stolen. I've concluded that justice isn't a destination. It's a process. We don't win every case. We don't save every client. But we keep trying. That's what matters. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's what your father believed, isn't it? That the trying was what mattered." "Yes. He used to say that medicine wasn't about curing every patient. It was about giving every patient the best chance you could." He sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was. I turned to Julian. You would have liked him. And he would have liked you. Eventually. Eventually? After the initial period of intense dislike. You did put him in prison. Right. That. I keep forgetting about that. No, you don't. No. I don't. He was quiet for a moment. Do you think about him a lot? Even now? Every day. But it's different now. It used to be painful. Now it's comforting. Like he's still with me. Like he's watching. He probably is. Watching. Being proud of you. You don't believe in that kind of thing. I didn't used to. But I've changed my mind about a lot of things over the past 8 years. He paused. You changed my mind. I didn't change your mind. You changed your own mind. Because of you. Because of you, Julian. Because you wanted to be better. Because you worked to be better. That wasn't me. That was all you. He smiled. We're very good at giving each other credit, aren't we? We're very good at a lot of things. Modesty isn't one of them. Modesty is overrated. I prefer accurate self-assessment. Your accurate self-assessment is that you're a disaster in the kitchen and a genius in the courtroom. Exactly. It's all about balance. The Vasquez case broke open on a Thursday. Julian found the missing witnesses. They had moved to California and changed their names, but he'd tracked them down through a combination of public records, social media, and what he called aggressive Googling. Both witnesses agreed to provide sworn affidavits recanting their original testimony. Both agreed to testify at the evidentiary hearing. This is it, Julian said, waving a stack of papers. This is our miracle. Or our break. Whatever you want to call it. I'll call it excellent work. How did you find them? One of them posted a photo of her cat on Instagram. The background had a distinctive landmark. I cross-referenced it with satellite imagery and found her address. You found a witness through her cat's Instagram? Cats are very helpful investigative tools. They're underutilized in the legal profession. I stared at him. You're insane. Insanely effective. We've had this conversation. We filed the affidavits the next morning. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to build a case that could free Carlos Vasquez after 15 years. We're going to win this one too, Julian said. You sound confident. I am confident. The evidence is solid. The witnesses are credible. The original investigation was a disaster. This is exactly the kind of case we win. And if we don't? Then we appeal. And we keep fighting. And we never give up. He paused. That's what your father would have wanted, isn't it? To keep fighting? Yes. That's exactly what he would have wanted. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday in early September. The weekend before, we took a rare day off. No case files. No index cards. No late-night strategy sessions. Just us, walking through Central Park, enjoying the last days of summer. Are you nervous? Julian asked. About the hearing? A little. But I'm always a little nervous before hearings. Not about the hearing. About the wedding. The wedding. We'd set a date, next spring, at a venue in Brooklyn that Eleanor had found and approved after an exhaustive search that had involved multiple PowerPoint presentations and at least one spreadsheet. The planning was mostly handled by Eleanor and my mother, who had bonded over their shared love of organization and their shared frustration with their children's inability to plan things properly. "I'm not nervous about the wedding," I said. "I'm excited." "Really? Really? I've spent so much of my life being afraid of losing people, afraid of being hurt, afraid of being happy. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm ready to be happy." Julian squeezed my hand. "That's the most optimistic thing I've ever heard you say." "I've been practicing. I have a therapist." "Dr. Kowalski?" "No, my own therapist. Dr. Chen. She's very good. She's helping me learn to accept good things without waiting for them to fall apart." "That sounds like valuable work." "It is. She also says I should stop trying to control everything." "How's that going?" "Terribly. I'm a lawyer. Control is my entire personality." Julian laughed. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two control-freak lawyers who can't cook French toast and are getting married next spring. We're a disaster. A beautiful disaster. The most beautiful disaster in Manhattan." We stopped at a bench near the lake, the same lake where I'd walked with my father as a child, feeding the ducks and talking about his patience and his dreams for the future. I hadn't been back here in years. It felt different now. Lighter. Like the ghosts had finally been laid to rest. "I wish he could be here," I said quietly. "At the wedding. To walk me down the aisle." Julian was silent for a moment. Then he said, "He will be. Not physically. But he'll be there. In you. In the work we do. In the people we help. He's part of everything we've built." "That's very poetic." "I've been practicing. I have index cards." "Of course you do." He pulled a small, crumpled card from his pocket. It was red, emotional appeal. "I wrote this a few months ago. I was going to use it in a hearing, but it didn't feel right. It felt like it was meant for you." I took the card. His handwriting was tiny and precise, crammed into every corner of the paper. "Justice isn't about winning. It's about remembering. Remembering the people we've lost. Remembering the people we're fighting for. Remembering that every case is a person, and every person has a story, and every story deserves to be heard." I looked up at him. "You wrote this for me?" "I wrote it for us. For the firm. For every client who walks through our door." He paused. "But mostly for you." I folded the card carefully and put it in my pocket. "I'm keeping this. I hoped you would. I'm going to frame it. Put it next to my father's letter." "Your father's letter?" "The one he left for me. The one I found in the attic." I touched my pocket, where the letter was folded next to Julian's index card. "He said he was proud of me. That I should keep fighting. That he loved me." "That sounds like good advice." "It's the best advice I've ever received." We sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks paddle across the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and orange. It was the kind of evening my father would have loved. The kind of evening that felt like a gift. "Julian," I said. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For fighting beside me. For believing in me. For loving me even when I couldn't love you back." "I would have waited forever," he said. "You know that, right? If you'd never forgiven me, I would have still been here. Still fighting. Still loving you. It was never conditional." "I know. That's why I forgave you. Because I was patient. Because you were sincere. Because you never stopped trying. Because you showed me, every single day, that you were a different person than the man who put my father in prison." That man is gone, Julian said quietly. I buried him a long time ago. I know. I helped you dig the grave. We laughed. It was a strange thing to laugh about, but grief and humor had always been tangled up for us. We'd learned to find lightness in the darkness, to joke about the things that had nearly destroyed us. It was how we survived. Come on, I said, standing up. We should get home. We have a hearing to prepare for. One more minute. I want to remember this moment. What's special about this moment? Everything. The lake. The sunset. You. The fact that we're here together, 8 years after everything fell apart. The fact that we're getting married. He looked at me. The fact that I'm happier than I ever thought I deserved to be. I sat back down. One more minute. One more minute. We stayed until the sun went down. The Vasquez hearing was our most difficult yet. The prosecution fought every piece of evidence. They challenged the recantations. They attacked the credibility of our witnesses. They argued that Carlos Vasquez had exhausted his appeals and that reopening the case would set a dangerous precedent. Julian was magnificent. He presented the evidence with surgical precision, dismantling the prosecution's arguments one by one. He called the recanting witnesses, who testified about the pressure they'd felt from the corrupt detective. He presented the Brady violations, the exculpatory evidence that had been withheld from the defense. He painted a picture of a system that had failed Carlos Vasquez at every level. And at the end, he picked up a red index card. Your Honor, he said, I want to talk about justice. Not the abstract concept. Not the word we use in law school and in courtrooms and in political speeches. Real justice. The kind that matters to real people. He paused, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Carlos Vasquez has been in prison for 15 years. He was 19 years old when he was arrested. He is now 34. He has spent almost half his life behind bars for a crime committed by someone else. His mother died 3 years ago, and he couldn't attend her funeral. His sister has spent every waking moment fighting for his freedom. And for 15 years, the system told them both that their fight was hopeless. He held up the card. Your Honor, the system was wrong. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. We have the truth. All we need is for this court to do what courts are supposed to do, deliver justice. Judge Morrison, the same judge who had presided over the Thompson case, was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Mr. Pierce, you've made your argument. I'll take it under advisement and issue a ruling by the end of the week. We waited. For 3 days, we waited. Julian checked his phone approximately every 45 seconds. I pretended to work on other cases while actually refreshing the court's website every 10 minutes. Priya brought us coffee and reassurance and told us to stop pacing because we were wearing grooves in the office floor. Grooves add character, Julian said. Grooves add tripping hazards. Sit down before you hurt yourself. The ruling came on Friday afternoon. Judge Morrison granted the motion to vacate. Carlos Vasquez was entitled to a new trial. We won. I'm not crying, Julian said. You're definitely crying. It's the pollen. It's September. There's no pollen. There's always pollen. It's a year-round phenomenon. I handed him a tissue. He took it. We stood in our office, surrounded by case files and index cards and the accumulated evidence of years of fighting for justice, and we held each other. Another one, I said. Another one. How many is that now? 7. 7 wrongful convictions overturned. That's a good number. It's a great number. It's also 7 too few. There are thousands more. Thousands of people still waiting. Then we'd better get back to work. He smiled. Yes, boss. Don't call me boss. Partner. Fiancé. Love of my life. Better. We got back to work. There were more names on the list. More families waiting. More fights to win. And we were ready for all of them.